Tubers, two bets, various crazy people. The topic of this video is going to be, will I succeed or will I not succeed in my retirement in the Philippines? Now, of course, you can insert any country that you want into this. It doesn't have to be the Philippines. It could be a move across the country for all I know. But since this is going to be a first-person interview with myself, I'm going to use the Philippines as an example. The inspiration has always been there to do this video. However, the way to articulate it has always been a mystery, up until about a week ago, when I was fortunate enough to have a 2.5-hour conversation with my longtime friend GT, who I've traveled with and who knows me like the back of his own hand, and I know him very well. And there are pretty much no secrets between the two of us. And so he was able to make a very candid and very honest assessment of what's happened to me over the almost 5 years that I've lived here, and why he considers my move here to have been a success. And it started out with him naming the 3 A's of the move to the Philippines, in my case. The first A was adjustment. You have to adjust. I shouldn't say you. I had to adjust to my new environment. And that was, boy, that was just a mishmash of different things. The weather, the money, the language, the culture, the people, the transportation. I could go on and on and on. But all of that coming at me at one time, the first week, the first month, was a bit overwhelming. But it was also kind of fun. It was very challenging. And I have a tendency to kind of roll with the punches, and I had made my mind up that I was going to give it 6 months when I came out here. And you know what? If I couldn't adjust to it, or if I didn't like it, I already knew that I had the option, and I was fully prepared to just take my ball and go home and decide and regroup and figure out what I would do. That was 5 years ago. The second A that Gary brought up in our conversation was adapt. As you adjust, you're in a learning process. You're learning to instantaneously be able to convert money in your brain. You're no longer wondering what is 100 pesos worth. That just starts to become instinctual. You're adapting to driving a motorbike, in my example, in traffic. Totally different from the first time to the 100th time. Over time, I was able to adapt to it, and still do. It's an ongoing process. Meeting people, dealing with foreigners, dealing with the locals, interacting with females. The list, again, it just goes on and on and on. And so I've never been ashamed to admit that in the time that I've lived here, I have had countless amounts of failures, if you want to define them as that, as far as all the above categories. I've made money mistakes since I've been here. I've made transportation errors since I've been here. I've made female companionship errors since I've been here. Through those errors, through those mistakes, and there's many, many more than I just mentioned, I simply adapted and adjusted to it so that I would hopefully not repeat them. And as time goes on, and I continued to adjust and continued to adapt, I became more and more comfortable within my own skin. I learned little tricks of the trade, if you will. I learned my proverbial shortcuts on how to get things done. And yet, does that define me as successful? And my answer to that is no. And Gary made that very clear in our conversation. Simply because you've adjusted to the weather, and simply because you've adapted to your environment to some degree so that you can navigate it on a more successful and more productive day does not necessarily mean that you've succeeded. For me, my idea of success was to be able to find contentment and find self-love, if you will, or self-acceptance, to find some joy, to be able to live within my means, to take the fact that I have a finite amount of money and budget it and adjust to that budget, adapt to that budget, stay within that budget, and live a very simple life compared to what I had in America. So I don't have anything flashy. I don't have a big fancy car. I've got now a 4.5-year-old scooter. I don't live in a big bright house with swimming pools and servants and drivers. It's just me and my girlfriend. Speaking of girlfriends, I made numbers and numbers of mistakes in the dating realm, if you will, out here, where the girls' reasons for being with me were not because they liked me, it was because of what I could do for them. And so I learned from that. You know, it was one of those things that I had to adjust to. It's one thing that I had to adapt to. I had to learn that what type of girl I was attracted to was not necessarily, initially they were someone I was interested in, but over time I made the adjustments and I made the adaptation to steer clear from them. There are fellow expats out here that have gone through the exact same thing, and they are pretty much, even after longer periods than me, what I can't help but describe anything but malcontents. They have gone through the same issues with the females, for example, and they now have concluded that all females are like that, and that there's no way you can find a good woman or an honest person here in the Philippines. There are guys that, even though they're here in this brand new country with all these natural resources and nature and fun and exciting places to go, beaches, mountains, restaurants, day trips, other islands to explore, their day is spent either individually or in some sort of coffee clutch where they've decided that their idea is to sit down and discuss whether or not the vaccine is great or if it's one big conspiracy against them. Whether or not Donald Trump is the next savior or if he's the devil. And together they sit and they drink their coffee or their beer, and that's pretty much the beginning, the middle, and the end of their day. They've already decided that the Philippines is hot and that there's stuff that's out of stock and that traffic can be a nightmare and nobody really speaks English here to the level that they thought it was going to be. The women can't be trusted and blah, 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 blah. Okay. I would call them unsuccessful. I, on the other hand, and this was Gary's observation of me, I too am fully aware that there are going to be times when things are out of stock. There's going to be times where the heat is almost unbearable, or the rain is almost, the weather is just going to be almost unbearable. There is going to be times where I get stuck in traffic and I get a big puff of diesel smoke going up my nose, and I know I'm going to go home and end up coughing for the rest of the night. And there's just, again, the litany will go on and on and on of reasons why things are bad. For me, And again, this was Gary's observation that he brought to my attention, was that I had the ability, as many other men here have, and women I suppose, that I look at the big picture. I take the camera, if you will, and I draw it back. Instead of not being able to see the forest for the trees, I'm looking straight at the forest. And yeah, it's got this, the Philippines has this, and this wrong with it. But for all the things that it's got wrong with it, in my mind, it's got 10 times more things right with it compared to what I had previously in my home country. And so if I really take the lens of the camera and draw it back, and I look at my life in America, and I look at my life here in the Philippines, well, the Philippines comes way up here. And the last A that Gary pointed out to me, which I really do want to be able to articulate here, is his compliment to me was, you know what, Paulie, you've looked at all the options. You've seen it for what it is. You've looked at the reality of the situation, and you have found contentment, you have found peace, you have found a great woman, and you're happy with living within your little budget that you have every month, simply because I have accepted the Philippines. I have accepted all of the inconsistencies and the negatives, and I have weighed them against the inconsistencies and the negatives of what I had before. And for me, I now possess the inner peace, inner joy, no self-loathing whatsoever. Again, I have just been blessed with the fact that I have a roof over my head, I have a loving companion, and I don't bemoan those that wronged me in the past here in the Philippines, i.e. the vendor that took advantage of me, or the female that was trying to scam me, or the trike driver that overcharged me, or any of that. That was just part of the adjustment and the adaptation. I have accepted it fully. And not only do I accept it, I embrace it. And I love it. And I am truly content. And as far as the other guys, some of them that we've observed that are we would call unsuccessful. I don't like to use the word failure. Some of them are simply disenchanted with their surroundings. Some of them still feel that they need to go out and make $1 million because they used to be a millionaire, and what they have here isn't enough. They need to go out and chase that million again, or they never made that million and they still want the opportunity to go and do it. I could name names. I could give you 100 guys, not 100, but I could give you 5 or 6 guys I know personally that are in that position. And they have not yet found their contentment here. They have not yet found their peace. I refuse to say they should stop and just go home and give up. What I prefer to think of, and I don't want to call them failures, what I prefer to think of them as, hopefully, it's my prayer that they are simply still works in progress. I truly hope and pray that they do find the ability to see what's around them, accept it for what it is, accept themselves for what they are, and be good with it. I hope that this video maybe rang true with you. And as always, I hope and I pray that all of you are safe, that you are doing well. If you're in a position in life where you're not able to accept your current position, I pray also that you too are a work in progress and will one day achieve that. I'll see you in the next video.